friends, welcome to episode 152 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How are you doing, Rob?
Honestly, not too bad.
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah, weather's starting to turn. I can feel it in my head, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
Snowing last night, 60 today or something.
60, yeah, 55, I think, something like that today.
Yeah, it's a good Michigan day.
Yeah.
Welcome to spring. But kitties are generally healthy. A little bit of a cold on one of them, but otherwise cuddly and adorable.
Yeah.
Yeah, the chicken cutlets are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But so not much other than to say we have a show to do.
Yeah, not much.
Something that
we had Mouse Guard last weekend.
We did have Mouse Guard last weekend, and that I think it was a good example of I think we both looked at it in kind of the same way as we played through. It was like something was different, and I think it was because people were different. People were just a little off. Our storyteller, Matt, even said at the end, he was like, "Yeah, I was a little off," and I didn't realize how much it came off that way. Mm-hmm. Didn't make it a bad session, but it goes to show you that it does make changes. Even when you think you've got everything organized, sometimes your own personal energy going into it can really change the way the game rolls together.
I mean, there's a lot of storytelling that's very much like bearing your soul, you know, and like I felt it a lot like with last week's episode. You know, I mean, like I said, it felt like doing a campaign overview of my own campaign was almost like my final exam, you know, my senior thesis sort of thing. And I was exhausted.
Yeah, I'm seriously considering dropping out before mine. And we're done. That's it. No more podcasts. We're just finishing. We're not going to do it.
Don't you dare.
I'll just change things at the last minute. It'll be great.
But yeah, no, it's no surprise that being, you know, in a weird headspace would make your game a little bit weird, you know.
Yeah. But at the same time, still was wonderful because Mouse Guard is very narrative, so it was comfortable. It was fun. We had a good time. And we had our new player who joined us, who I think did great.
Yeah.
Especially for someone who, hasn't gamed in a very long time, and the last time that they gamed, they had horrible experiences. You
know, we have several friends like that, too, who are just like, you know, oh, yeah, I tried role-playing once, it sucked, and I never went back, and I don't understand people who do that. And I feel, like, personally responsible for sitting each and every one of them down at a table and going, like, all right, look.
Point on the book where they hurt you.
Right, you're going to have a good experience if it kills me.
Exactly.
So, anyway, we do have a show tonight. And that show is all about consequences.
Yes, consequences. We're not talking about consequences outside a game. We're talking about your characters, your players, their character actions, and what those consequences are. And we use the term consequences because it's not just a pass-fail thing. That is a common point. It is what is oftenly used, and it's not bad. We've talked about it through other systems, where you'll, instead of having a failure where it is a direct negative, a critical failure, if you will, that causes horrific things, that it leads to something else, that it is a extension, and by right, it continues the narrative. Yeah. Whether it's in a new direction or what have you.
Yeah. Basically, consequences are just all the stuff like you've heard of the butterfly effect. You know, a butterfly flaps its wings in California and creates a hurricane on the other side of the world or whatever. Yeah. But the consequences, all we're referring to with consequences is all the stuff that happens after the butterfly flaps its wings. You know, if a die hits the table, there's going to be some consequence. If a PC takes a definitive action, there should be consequences for it. Whether those consequences are good or whether they're bad, you know, everything remains to be seen in how you adjudicate them and what the system calls for.
Yeah, and I'm gonna bring up a quote here at the beginning, and reiterate it again at the end because I think it says enough that we've said this before multiple times, and that is that when you're asking your players to make a roll, there should be a reason behind it.
Yes,
you should know that there is something beyond it that is important. And if your adventures are just a series of doors, make sure all of those doors have a purpose. So we're going to kind of start with that mentality. So we're not just talking about like random things that happen. We're talking about having consequences when you ask your players to make a roll and you're thinking about those consequences and what they can mean. Mm-hmm. So now there are a lot of different systems that handle this differently.
Yes.
Yes. The most notable is the binary pass-fail system. D&D 5th edition has that. Almost all the D&D editions have that. Mm-hmm. So it is a design that it is just a straight success and failure kind of design. And it doesn't really give you any gray space.
Yeah, rule as written, at least. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of dungeon masters will take liberties with the system, and especially high roll might get, better results, and mm-hmm. especially low roll, under the difficulty class needed, mm-hmm. Might get especially egregious results. But rule as written, that's not technically, that's DM embellishment at that point,
And then, I guess for me, there's like this whole other layer that I see, and that is the D&D has become a social effect, and people who are not even attached to D&D, never played it, never picked up a book, probably never even watched an actual session of D&D, have commentary on it. They have, you see it in, what we commonly refer to as like mistakes in shows where they show people playing D&D or some variant that is supposed to represent D&D and making rolls, and what they're doing doesn't make sense for even role playing. Mm-hmm. But the thing that is categorically the same, which is the 1 or the 20. I roll a 20 and amazing epic things happen that are outside of all design and mechanic. Right? Or if I roll a 1, it's so critical my failure that I literally kill somebody.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, I think, proverbially has kind of changed the paradigm of how players come into D&D and their expectations.
I mean, I don't know that I would put as much weight on, like, pop culture media as you would. I think a lot of this stuff was prevalent in the gaming space before the common, the mainstreaming of D&D that came with things like Critical Role. Mm-hmm. But I do agree that there is this sort of mythification of the Nat 1 and the Nat 20. Mm-hmm. And, one thing I say a lot is that negative experiences often come from mismanaged expectations. Okay, yes. If a player has an expectation that something is or is not going to happen, and that thing does or does not happen, in defiance of their expectations, mm-hmm. they will have hurt feelings over that, whether those expectations were realistic or not.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we sat down at a table where a game system has a D20 in it, and someone rolls a 1, everybody just does that at the table, and you're like it doesn't mean anything. Rule as written,
it's not any worse than rolling 1 under the difficulty class, which is 15.
Right.
A 14 through 1 yield the exact same results. Yeah. You just didn't pass,
Yeah. But there's that thing, or when somebody rolls so excessively over. Mm-hmm. That they're thinking that it should mean something excessive as well.
Yeah. I've had that happen at my tables too, where it's like, I'm going to roll a persuasion check to see if I can get them to do this thing. And I'm like, okay, roll a persuasion. They're like, I rolled a 36, and they just smile at me smugly, like that means that it's mind control now. And you're like, that's not at all how that works. Like they're still going to go, all right, I'll reluctantly do it, but I still hate you. Like, but I rolled a 36. I don't care what you rolled. Mm-hmm. It was over the difficulty class. You passed. It's not mind control suddenly because you hit 30, mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there are some systems that allow for those things. Powered by the Apocalypse, for example, has a partial success system.
Yep.
So if you're under or over, you have this, or mostly if it's under, you can still succeed in some way, mm-hmm. but there's a consequence that follows into that.
Yeah, typically powered by Apocalypse, it's going to be 2d6 mm-hmm. Dice, and then 6 or lower is a failure. 10 or higher is a full success. You achieve the full desired effect of what you were trying to do.
Right.
And then you've got this weird gray area in the middle with 7 to 9. 7, 8, and 9 is a partial success, and that's going to be There's a lot of ways to interpret those. Mm-hmm. Some of them are success, but with consequences, mm-hmm. like we were talking about, where, for instance, like in Dungeon World, your attack may do damage, but they may get, like, to riposte and mm-hmm. do damage to you in return.
Right.
You may successfully climb up the hill, or, up the cliffside you were climbing, but, an item of your equipment comes loose and tumbles down the mountainside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Choose an item and discard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of stuff. And so you've got this neat little gray area where, mm-hmm. like, stuff almost happens right, but you lose some resources.
Yeah, and I mean, and to talk about that to another degree, Mouse Guard has that as well, where the narrative will continue, but you're trying to cross a river, mm-hmm. you guys don't get enough successes. Okay, you've made it across the river, but you're tired, which is a condition, and you've lost some gear. Mm-hmm. And it takes you a day to retrieve the important things.
Yeah.
But again, the story continues, but now you're a little later, you're a little more weary, and that affects the story going forward.
Yeah, my entire character arc was changed over a failure like that. Mm-hmm. Laying mm-hmm. down the Western Scent border, and I had all these toxic chemicals that my character has no experience with, and I'm trying to use them, and I botched that roll horribly. And I'm like, oh God, all of the kingdom is going to die now because I didn't pass my roll to. He's like, no, you still do it. Like, mm-hmm. you're still just dumping chemicals on the ground, but you get them all over you, and you're saturated in them, and they get in your lungs and stuff like that, and now you are sick. You have the sick condition. And then we couldn't get that cured for like 2 game sessions after.
Mm-hmm.
And it's utterly changed how I play the character now,
Yeah.
But, things didn't utterly fall apart the moment I failed that roll. It was a very, very important roll, but the story moved on,
Yeah, and
there was success with consequences.
Correct. And we'll kind of get into a bit more of that. Well, we will get into that a bit more later. But to go on, we also have opportunity and complications that some systems have. Star Wars L5R 7th C 2nd edition has that.
But you skipped one.
Oh, that's true. There's the margins for success, which
we'll go back.
7th C has. But
mm-hmm.
but I kind of wanted to step into this one because it incorporates both success and opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a stretch from where we were talking about, where it's not just a matter of failing or succeeding. It's as if I get a success and I have extra, I might also extend the success to an additional opportunity, mm-hmm. which I think is a really good way of doing that, because that makes those heroic-sized rolls that we have, the 35 on persuasion, offer not necessarily more than what you were trying to do, which was to persuade that person, but maybe it also raised your status with other people in the space.
Yeah.
Maybe because of that, someone else comes to you and says, I saw the way that you handled this situation, and I would very much like you to speak to our diplomat. I think you could also, garner some interest from him. Fantastic, and it opens up more story options. Mm-hmm. And I think those kinds of things, as well as the failure or choice of failure and an opportunity versus a failure and a complication, also set that precedence. Meaning, if I don't have enough successes to be able to complete the task and maybe something I saw that was available as an opportunity, I can choose to fail and still get the opportunity. The thing that was there, for instance, one of the most common ones is your group has to make it, the building's on fire, you have to make it through this room, and there are guards in the space firing arrows. Mm-hmm. You have to make the success, your first success is to cross the room. Your complications that you also have in that are damage from the fire, damage from the guards, but also in the room under, that's available is the map, which is still on the table.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity. So you have to make success just to get through the room. Mm-hmm. You're still going to take damage up, but you're going to complete that task. The two complications are then you have to make the decision on, okay, well, I made 2 successes. Do I not take damage from one of the 2 sources? Or do I take the damage and get the map? Mm-hmm. Or do I assist another player with some of my successes to help mitigate what they take? Or I take it upon myself.
Right.
So it's things like that can really make a difference. And that's why I kind of wanted to now step to the margins of success and failure.
Well, hang on. I think there's still stuff to discuss with the opportunity and complications, because one of the big systems that does that really well is all the Fantasy Flight games.
Okay.
And that's kind of where this originally kind of came up for me, was like Legend of the Five Rings and Star Wars.
Okay.
And
I'm honestly trying to remember the Star Wars stuff off the top of my head, but please
think more Legend of the Five Rings. I'm pretty sure that's a refresher in your mind.
Probably.
But you've got on the dice. You have opportunities and complications.
Oh, that's right.
That come up on the dice themselves. And so what it does is it creates a 4-axis sort of outcome possibility where you still do have your success or failure, because you still need, a certain amount of successes to be able to, pass the threshold of what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Typically only one, but it might be higher depending on what you're trying to do. But on top of the success or failure on your dice, you've got opportunities and complications, or strife, I believe they call it I think it's complications in Star Wars. I could be wrong about that. But one way or another, there are positives and negatives that do not follow into the success or failure of your actual intended task. And this is where you can get things like, a failure with opportunity. You may have failed to, outmaneuver the other person in courtly politics. You still came away from it looking kind of like a jerk, and they're still in an elevated status. You weren't able to talk circles around them and gain favor in the court.
Right.
Unfortunately. But you did get them to reveal a secret in court. Mm-hmm. And now you know where the key to their hidden vault is.
Right.
So you still lose face, but there's a side thing that kind of happens out of it. Yeah. And I think that's that's a super interesting system for consequences for me, because it's a lot less linear than just pass or fail. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's at the same point, it reminds me of the scene from A Few Good Men where they're escalating back and forth at the end of the movie, and he's just like, did you or did you not do the code red? And he breaks.
You're damn right I ordered the code red. Yeah. And you're like, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I just lost some face in the court because the judge was just about to throw me out and declare a mistrial.
Right, and I probably did do a few things I shouldn't have done, which is going to cause me future harm. But I just changed this case. Instantaneously.
But I got the opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. Does it change their outcome? No. Does it change his? Yes. Mm-hmm. Did it probably save people in the future? Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of moments that can really make a huge difference about those complications. And sometimes in the system, if you're willing to just accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I really love this is because it kind of offers like a lateral progression to your story, where you may not succeed on the thing that you were trying to do, which would move the story quote unquote forward, but as that old saying goes, when one door closes, another opens, and this is exactly that style of consequence that opens up another door for you, so the story can move sideways, maybe not forward. But an opportunity is over and over here, and maybe we can try that one to move forward.
Right. Because you never know which direction your players are going to move.
Yeah, you really don't. You really don't. It's all about giving them opportunities to do so, though.
Yes. So then, realistically, to wrap this up, you kind of got the margins for success, the 7C, the White Wolf design, where it's...
Sway does this, too.
Yes, where you've got these higher numbers that create raises or consecutive successes that sit on top. And traditionally that just scales the rewards up.
Yeah, but it can scale them down as well.
Yeah.
I was listening to another podcast about Savage Worlds earlier today, and they were talking about how Savage Worlds actually has 4 modes of outcome. Mm-hmm. And that is not just success or failure,
right,
but critical failure when both your wild die and your skill die or trait die comes up as a 1.
Right.
And raises, which is technically some rolls are just if you raise at all.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's kind of like a critical success, but then there are other rolls where you can just keep raising.
Right.
And 4 or 5 raises are multiple degrees of success.
Right.
Right. I know 7th Sea does that too, where you can keep raising on things. Mm-hmm. We've got one player in our table who historically rolled, I think, a triple-digit number on a D10.
Yes, on a couple D10, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was impressive, to say the least, but at the same time, like, the number of raises just was apocalyptic at that point.
Yeah.
And it was hard to figure out a solution as a storyteller that fit, you know? It's the proverbial, like, the person shoots the gun and it's like, you missed. Did I? And the bullet zings off of 100 things, which causes all of this catastrophic failure, and, like, the building falls down around them.
Some Rube Goldberg machine of bullets.
Yeah, exactly. So, but within mechanics, I thought I saw something that I thought was a neat way that sat on kind of top of things, a homebrew, if you will,
sure,
of mechanic that I saw in the Nerdologist. And that is, in regards to failing forward, which is something we're going to discuss a little bit further ahead. But the idea that you set forth to your players still a success rate, but they need to gain so many successes. We do this in Mouse Guard, often. And they have to, and the person that was writing this said that the players would need to get twice the number of successes equal to the player before they get the number of failures equal to the player. And it felt very much like the pips from Mouse Guard to raise yourself up.
Yep.
And just doing that using different checks. So instead of it being, immediately leading to combat, you have this point where, like, okay, you didn't get through the door, or you're unlocking a door. Mm-hmm. Okay, you failed that check. All right, now we're in a consequence mode. How are you, the door opens and behind it is a guard who literally was about to walk out and go to the John. Mm-hmm. He screams. How are you going to handle this situation?
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
Exactly, but it doesn't have to immediately lead into combat. You can present as like, okay, I'm going to use my athletics to do this. Okay, he's using the athletic skill. What skill beyond athletics are you going to use? And you move around the table like that until you come back. Uh-huh. And either they get the number of failures that fails out, or they get enough successes to counteract it.
Yeah. These are, this is very much like, skill challenges in 4th edition D&D. They had these. Mm-hmm. And, these are very much like dramatic tasks in, Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of this style of play, where, using your abilities in interesting ways that all kind of compound onto each other for a full narrative. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not going to succeed, but it allows them to succeed in a different way and move the narrative and continue it going. So in all of that, we're really kind of talking about the base mechanics that the system has forth. We're not really talking about the plot consequences behind that. Like, how does that change things on the other side?
Yeah. Not all of these, all your consequences are going to be mechanical, and not all of your consequences are going to come from rolls. Mm-hmm. Interacting with a story should really feel organic. Mm-hmm. And it needs to move with the characters. So if they interact with the plot, even just by talking to an NPC, whether there's a persuasion check or whatever involved, there should be some action on the part of that NPC. Mm-hmm. There should be some movement in the plot.
Right, because they're interacting.
Exactly.
Every interaction needs to be logged in as a storyteller and weighted in some way. I mean, granted, sometimes it's just access to an opportunity, which is a thing, but they're interacting with the game. They're interacting with your story.
Exactly.
With the story.
I've got a player at my table who frequently, whenever he's in his hometown, will donate some, if not all, of his earnings from his last job to a local orphanage. Mm-hmm. And we just haven't been around the home city long enough to get there. But we're getting there in Act 2, so it'll definitely become a thing. But his good deeds should definitely have some positive effect on the plot. I
agree. Yeah.
It's not necessarily quantified into a mechanical number. Good reputation opens opportunities that weren't available to him before. Mm-hmm. maybe because he's known as a generous or kind person, people might approach him with things. He's going to reap some sort of benefit from that, Consequently, though, like if you've got a character who does something cruel, this is a typical one. Like when you've got a murder hobo in the party,
thief, murder hobo, general disgruntling person.
Yeah, someone who just sees that that hey, I've got a powerful character who's got more hit points than you and can do X amount of damage in a turn. Ergo, I can get away with doing whatever I want in your D&D game.
Right.
But sometimes also there's just characters who are like this. Not because they're being jerks at the table, just because they're a bad character. But those things should also have consequences to them. Loved ones of the wronged party, or possibly the wronged party themselves, if they're still alive to do so, might seek vengeance.
Yeah.
This might not be outright trying to kill them. There's a lot of different ways that you can seek vengeance on someone, providing, information to their known enemies. Basically just trying to have them shunned from society and
doors
like
closing
when
you come
closing.
in.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That was one of the ones that got me was a group basically murdered hoboed their way through something terribly. And instead of it having a consequence in the area that they were in, because that area was fine with what they did.
Yeah.
They're like, they finished what they needed to. They were like, yep, that's all cool. And then literally the next town that they go to, people are closing their doors, taking their kids off the street. It's the bad guys came into town kind of thing.
Yeah.
The posse. And then
you see that in the westerns,
the old westerns,
the old the open sign being closed, flipped around to the closed side.
Things shuttering up, and then the sheriff comes out and is just like, I'm sorry, we're closed. Like, what do you mean you're closed? Town doesn't want anything to do with you folks. Why don't you just mosey on out of here, and there's another 2 miles down the road, you'll find this place, and they'll probably be fine taking you in.
Yeah.
And then you're like, but we're tired and we're here and we have money. We don't care. I'm sorry. You bring nothing but trouble and death.
Yep.
We would like you to keep moving on. And it's like, oh boy, because now you have to go and survive out in the woods.
Yeah. You thought you were going to be able to sell some of your stuff or buy some new healing potions. None of those resources are now available to you. So.
Yeah. I mean, granted, bandits, when they see you, they're like running away because, they might, they'll steal from a normal person. They won't kill them or anything like that. But you'll literally just outright murder bandits. Like, whoa, you're sorry. Don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
So,
the other one that we've talked about too a little bit is like when you've got a choice between an A plot and a B plot.
Oh yeah.
There should be some consequence for not choosing the other plot.
Okay.
And we talked about this. There was a whole, I think, show kind of dedicated to plot advancement and stuff like that. I don't remember exactly the scope of the discussion, but I remember this coming up before, where we talked about not having it be like apocalyptic consequences. Like,
right.
If you choose to go stop the big bad evil guy from getting the magical artifact in the ancient buried temple,
right,
you shouldn't send like a dragon to destroy a town.
That's right.
Because
as a storyteller,
what you're going to do is teach your players never to make a choice ever again, because it will always be the wrong choice.
Right.
No,
I'm with you.
But what I'm talking about is stuff like, in my game, you're all part of a guild.
Yeah.
And so there are other NPC adventurers who kind of do the same job you guys do, Yeah. So maybe there are 2 jobs you've got available to you. You could go to this dungeon or you could go to that dungeon. You choose to go to dungeon A, maybe they get sent to dungeon B. Okay? And consequently, they will have encountered the stuff that was in dungeon B. Maybe one of them comes back injured. Maybe they come back with a new artifact. Maybe they've got stories to tell about, clues that they found there or some artifacts that they came back with or whatever. But something in the story should happen because dungeon B is still there. Event B still takes place.
Right.
And that should still show in your story. Just basically because the world doesn't stop when your PCs aren't there to witness it.
Yeah. I like one of the things that's akin to in my mind is a discussion where a guy basically had, it was like like a quest challenge where it was multiple groups going out and you had to, it was for a reward. Like the king was just like, we're trying to find what adventuring group is going to do best. So you need to do these 7 tasks, and whoever completes the most tasks and returns will receive the favor, money, and, this magical scroll or whatever.
Yeah.
And, the storyteller basically gauged the failure and successes based upon how the party did. Meaning, if the party did very well at their success, like exceptionally well, one of the other groups would do horrific on theirs.
Oh.
And the other one would complete the task.
Interesting.
So, like, maybe if the main party didn't take any damage whatsoever and, like, just aced their way through it, maybe one of those groups lost a person and didn't complete the task and came back broken. Like, it's still there and that guy's body is there.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. And that way, those tasks are still open. They could go do them. But now they're going to find whatever was there waiting for them is now geared up and has, like, lunch, kind of a thing. And they're telling the story of what happened so they can get intel from that group if they're willing to give it to them, kind of a thing, and work it out. But yeah, he said that he found that the party turned from like, yeah, we're going to win this no matter what, to holy God, this is exceptionally dangerous. And these other people we shouldn't be shunning them. Like, we can all get close to finishing this.
Yeah, you've always got some, like, trauma bonding over the difficulty of the task.
Of course, one of the teams was your typical, like, ace rival team.
Sure.
That, was completing their tasks without a problem. But at the same time, they were still taking injuries the whole time.
Sure.
Because the other group was being able to succeed. And if they failed at all, like, that group, gloriously made it through theirs, kind of a thing, and gained something from it. And you're like, I'm sorry,
Right.
But it changed, like, the players never caught on to that's what he was doing.
I thought that's brilliant.
I thought it was a really neat way of handling the situation.
That is
brilliant.
And
he said, you can do this with your villains, meaning if your players are failing, your villain is winning. Remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a interesting way to punch the dynamic.
That is.
It's a consequence.
I'm gonna have to keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
you had some really good consequences in your own
put
game.
This in here. I did.
It was revealed your last game.
Yes.
So you've got this thing where there are these orbs of magic that are attuned to your typical, like, D&D schools of magic. So divination, necromancy,
abjuration,
conjuration, abjuration, things like that, right? Yep. Now, before we had a real good scope of what these things were and what, who created them, what purpose they served in the world, you had this whole thing about these evil wizards that were trying to do this weird thing with mirrors.
Yes.
That were the big bad evil guys. They were all an evil organization. So
correct.
Lots and lots of people who were doing this. One of your players got a hold of both the orb of divination and the orb of necromancy.
Yes.
And said, Orb of Divination, show me all of my enemies. Orb of Necromancy, power word kill.
Yep. And just
remote death striked all of them.
Yeah. And the player, I always have to remember, the character.
Yes.
Witnessed through portals, these mirrored portals that showed up, the destruction that it wrought. And it was thousands dead. And
here this character is thinking, like, hey, all right, I just resolved that plot, just wash my hands of it, just mass genocide of all of my enemies, but hey, they were all bad.
Yep.
Come last session.
Yeah.
And we touch the Orb of Divination again, and we get glimpses of possible futures.
Yes.
And one of them shows a vast army. And we've come to find out that these orbs are here because an evil goddess of magic created them essentially to
manipulate the creation.
Manipulate magic to be under her purview.
Yep.
And all the magic done with these orbs essentially goes through her. And all of the people that this character killed using these orbs are now essentially dead spirits in her spectral army.
Correct.
We added thousands to her number.
Yeah.
By wiping them off the material plane and putting them directly into her pocket.
Yep. And you saw those people come back.
Yeah.
Because whenever you get close to destroying one, going through the task of destroying one, she is alerted. And so she always sends her army, portions of her army as best she can. And in this case, she sent a good portion. And in fact, one of the people that you outright murdered and his particular battalion, if you will, show up and you're like, wait a second, how are you? Uh-oh. Yeah.
Well, I didn't murder him.
Yes.
I'm just a trail guide.
That is true. That is true. But needless to say, it did change your character's perspective.
Yeah, it was a real cool set of consequences.
Yeah. And there's more than that out there. That's just one part of it.
Oh, I'm sure.
But you can imagine some of the other pieces that are now coming into play because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can. I'm sorry. I mean, like, but the thing was, I wasn't there for most of the beginning of the campaign when these orbs were getting used. Like, I was kind of there after the orb thing was kind of already settled. So, this is all news to me, as a player and as a character, of kind of going, you guys did what? And finding out how deep that rabbit hole goes. But it was a cool set of consequences of just seeing, the direct action and direct consequence because of action.
Yeah.
And that sort of playing the long game of like, this will eventually come back around to bite you.
Yeah.
It might take years to do.
It did.
But it came back to bite.
And I think that's really why you don't write the future.
Yeah.
Because you never know when a moment like that is going to make a significant change. I had another one when we had a miraculous roll that changed my plot. Like, I had a character leave that was an NPC who was meant to disappear.
It was a divine intervention.
And a divine intervention that was incredible. And so I made an incredible change. I had to make an incredible change that brought that person back.
Yeah.
And that allowed something to come forward. Now it's taking me a little time to figure out how to get that into the narrative and make it a lasting thing. But now it's going to have a weighty effect.
Yeah.
So.
And even just in the short term, like, I mean, we're talking about consequences that are, years in the making or anything like that. But like, I don't really write, I kind of have an overall sketch, like a framework for how I want my plot to go.
Yeah.
I know essentially where my hard moves are going to be, but how we're going to get there and what the plot is going to look like when it unfolds is never written until the game session before.
Yeah.
Because I can't. I have to know what you guys did before so I know what to make significant in the next section.
Yep.
Doesn't even have to be big things like killing thousands of people with magical orbs. Sometimes it's just an NPC you decide to talk to.
Yep.
That might get involved in a plot now. Or might not get involved in a plot now. Or, might be a friend instead of an enemy. Or might be an enemy instead of a friend.
Right. Okay. So I think the next thing to really discuss is the concept of failing forward.
Yes.
Where to get back to the root of consequences and what happens with those players is that we have this misconception that failure is a no. I think in some ways that, like, did the door unlock? When I tried to pick the lock, the answer is no. Well, can I try it again? Well, no, you can't do the same skill check twice. Like,
well, that's dumb, but I would just keep trying,
Right. I wouldn't just stop. But the whole thing is that it is not so much that you can't fail, it's that your failure doesn't just stop the story.
Right.
Death stops stories. We know this. But not getting through a doorway, that's important. Remember, you put the door there for a reason.
Yep.
This isn't a video game where the door can't be unlocked, but there's a giant hole in the wall next to it that you can't step through. Which is silly.
There's that famous picture of that door in, I want to say it's Fallout 3 or something like that. That's like, lockpicking 100 required, and it's like half a door on a crumbled wall.
Right, that you can literally walk around.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's those kinds of things that it's, failing forward does not mean you can't fail, but it does mean that when you do have consequences that advance the story, it continues the story. It's part of that narrative. Failing forward is about putting the narrative first. It's about, regardless good or for bad, right? So we're assuring that the characters have meaning to the story regardless of their actions' consequences.
Yes.
Whether it's positive or negative. So to do this, we have to think about the action as a whole, not as a pass-fail. You've got a good one in here that the DM 101 workshop, dmworkshop.com has, which is that you go to persuade a duke, right? To just get passage through their lands. That's it. It's real simple, right? It's a persuasion check. You fail it. Okay, the first response is,
okay, so what, are we just stuck now? We just can't go?
Right.
You know?
It means that you didn't garner the favor to do that, but maybe you learned something from it.
The important thing is, as a storyteller, to then still provide a way forward.
Correct.
Now, the way forward legitimately with the Duke's blessing is shut.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't proceed forward.
Right.
So the example that was given was like, you learn because of your interactions with the Duke and because the Duke has snubbed you, there are people who are attempting to overthrow the Duke that now see you as an ally because you were snubbed by him, and they approach you to help them out to overthrow.
Yep.
Or you could just defy him.
Yeah.
Sneak out of the city. Maybe use some of these, these rebellion, people to help you do it.
Yeah.
There's a number of ways you can do it, but there's always an option to move forward. Even if you need to take a couple steps to the side to do it. There's always an option. The story doesn't stop there.
Yeah, I mean, in your story, just in the most recent episodes that we've had, we weren't able to stop the villain that we were dealing with from fleeing. They fled. Now, we could have, but we didn't. That didn't happen. So now there are going to be consequences for having that not succeed, but we didn't feel like it was a loss because at the same time we were still in the sewers and we were able to find the other NPC and save them.
Yes.
Which felt like a win.
Yeah, exactly. You still garnered a win out of it, even though the villain got away. And so now the story is going to continue with the villain having gotten away. They're going to be able to proceed with their plans in a certain way that would have changed how the story came out. If Yorda had been defeated, you'd have gone like, yay, Yorda's been defeated, now let's deal with the Count.
But one of the things you did with the Helgrid character is we brought Helgrid back, and that garnered us favor with someone else.
Yeah, it did.
And gave us access that we wouldn't normally have had. It gave us favor. It gained us compassion in a direction, so that we now had a trust link with somebody. We had raised a value with someone else, a reputational value, not unlike the concept with the Duke. Very similar to that. And I thought that the narrative direction of that made it feel more than just a we saved the princess win. That doesn't give you anything. This gave us a reputation win, which was worth way more.
And you guys are minor spoiler. But you guys are going to see more of that in the next session.
Yeah.
Because two of our other players basically identified and recovered the bodies of the blood fiends that you had killed, which are people's loved ones.
Yeah.
And so there are people now who know where it's sad that they're dead. They were turned into vampires and killed, but at least they have closure. There are 9 families out there that now have closure. And that will be a plot element in our
which is wonderful. That kind of way, because again, it's players interacting with the plot in a specific way that doesn't feel like it has a consequence, but it should. Yeah, and it does.
Absolutely. You had an effect. Like it's such a small thing too for like the players to say like, oh, and yeah, we just let the people know on the wanted poster or the missing persons posters that we found their loved ones.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole discussion was literally that long.
Yeah, about that.
But it's when you think about that action, like really consider if this were the real world, that's 9 families you have had a profound impact, emotional impact on.
Yeah, positive at that.
Positive impact.
Because they've had negative impacts from everyone else. Like, oh, we're doing the best we can,
And nothing getting
done. And then you step into town and 2 days later everything kind of comes to conclusion for them.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
They might not have much, but they have a voice.
And so just thinking about these things and the effect your PCs have on the NPCs around them and stuff like that, just doing their job, just doing their basic adventuring thing, you can have some really profound plot impacts like that.
Okay. So getting that, let's set a situation.
All right.
Okay, where let's start on the simple, on the micro, on the specific event. Of this failing forward idea, because I think this kind of brings it into perspective. Mm-hmm. So you've got a door. Like, your players have made the decision that they're going to break into this keep, right? There are guards. They've snuck their way to a back door, and they're going to unlock it. Mm-hmm. For anyone familiar with the most critical role animation, doors are hell.
Yeah.
Literally the biggest enemy. But, and in that situation, they have the same kind of thing. But the player who has to unlock the door fails. How do you fail forward in that situation and set up a consequence? Because you could just tell them no. Mm-hmm. The door doesn't unlock. Okay. The first reaction, the gut, or you could say, twitch reaction is to say the guards notice you. Mm-hmm. You made too much noise and the guards come around the corner. Now you're directly into combat or a chase. Mm-hmm. If the players are like, we're bailing at that point. Like the guards see you and they chase you out and you do a little chase sequence and they leave. It just means they're going to come back the next night to try again. You're going to have double the garrison. Maybe that door is being watched more. Mm-hmm. And it feels like a repetition.
It feels like a repetition, and it bogs the game down.
Yeah, you're not really advancing the narrative in any way when you do that.
Yeah.
Do you let them through the door though with a consequence? So the door opens, and maybe while they're picking at the lock, the cook inside hears it and just opens the door thinking it's a guard trying to get in or something and failing, and sees this group of people and screams.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're dealing with the consequences of this bystander. Mm-hmm. Not a guard, not someone ready to kill them in any way, just someone screaming. Okay? Which is definitely going to alert something. How do you handle that opportunity or consequence?
Yeah.
Can they continue moving through the story? Now is it a smash and grab? They bolt past the cook and now have to make their way through a challenging event, that may still not be a full combat situation.
Do they take the cook hostage and now have to do the heist with a hostage?
With a hostage, yeah. And possibly be the bad guys?
And possibly be, just because something went wrong. I was listening to somebody else and they were talking about, what are you really trying to do with this role? Yeah. Are you trying to unlock the door? Or are you just trying to get through the door unseen?
Exactly.
And that right there can inform your consequence, because it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that with enough time, the rogue is going to unlock the door.
Yep.
But is it going to happen fast enough that the patrol doesn't come around and see them doing it?
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I think that's the feeling, what kind of a feeling do you want to present? Mm-hmm. These people are skilled. Even level 1 characters are skilled to a degree.
Yes.
You have to understand that you're better than the average person.
Yes.
So because of that, you have to change your mind frame about how challenging something is for them. You can't say, oh no, fighter, it is way too big of a door for you to open. Mm-hmm. When literally there's a handle and a lock on it and a normal person pushes it open.
Yeah.
Like, fine, I ignore the door and go through the wall next to it. I'm level 10. This isn't a problem.
Hulk smash, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that kind of a thing where it's like, why is this door a problem for you as a storyteller to open? And what's the real meaning behind it?
Yeah.
And I always believe that there should be a deeper meaning behind those simple tasks, if you really want them to be something that changes the narrative. And that kind of brings us to the macro that we're dealing with, which is a situation that I read about where it was basically like a Batman kind of pit, where and I don't remember which one it is with Bane, where basically he ends up in this prison that's a pit.
Oh, that was the last of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies with Bane in it, yeah.
And he's basically kind of broken at the bottom of this pit, gets himself together, realizes he has to do this elaborate parkour to get out, basically, Simon parkour, and no one, only one person's ever done it. and he tries and fails and tries and fails and finally succeeds. The players in this particular write-up had put themselves in this situation. They went and traversed a pit that they knew would be a challenge and filled with problems, and the bottom of it is 100% filled with problems, but they got what they needed. They were now climbing out. They had not had a chance to take a short rest or a long rest because they're literally climbing a precipice of a wall that leads up to a tiny hole.
Yeah.
And there is no way for them to easily get out otherwise. So they're grinding through these successes, and he ended the session, the individual ended the session, with them failing to make their last checks. Mm-hmm. All the players failed. He was like, do I just have them fall? Like, I don't know the right way to handle this so it doesn't feel like a complete failure.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of moment where you say, okay, do you fail forward? Do they succeed with a consequence that is equal to the challenge? Mm-hmm. And that's where weights can get very challenging to try and figure out how to handle. And, is it a matter of the possibility of outcomes be that they don't fall to the death? That ends the story. Like, there's nothing good that comes of that. But should the consequence equal the weight of the challenge? Did the players feel that? And is there a harm in talking to them narratively about it? Like, okay, guys, how do we want to handle this? And there were some really good representations. Like, one of them said, okay, they're all hanging on by a thread. Mm-hmm. Basically, someone slips off the wall, but they're roped together, so that pulls that person free of the wall, and now everyone else is dealing with this complication. Mm-hmm. Okay, so everybody's at disadvantage to their next check. Ooh, that adds tension.
Yeah.
But they get another check, right? And, does that person then make the decision like, no, guys, I want you to make it, and cut themselves free, reducing that and letting them go? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, that's a consequence. If I were the DM and they said, I'm going to do that, 100% I'd be like, okay, you cut the rope, you fall, the rest of you can make the climb out now.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap, that just happened.
Yeah.
Right. And it's those types of things that you can sometimes present to your players in moments like that and feel the consequences and the weight. Mm-hmm. And that's where failing forward can present more narrative, because now you have something to deal with. A, the death of a character, and B, you made it out with what you needed, and now it has more weight to you than what it is.
Yeah, because someone else's blood is on it, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're doing it for them, mm-hmm. Kind of a thing. And I love that if you can take the time to think about those moments, it can completely change your game.
Yeah, absolutely can.
So,
it requires a certain amount of buy-in from your players.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But if you can foster that environment,
it's that investment. Yeah. If they were invested in that moment, and I think that's where that weight came from.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now, did you have any final thoughts, or do you want to roll into questions?
I do have a few in here, and some of it is just kind of a recap to kind of help the people, because we've talked about a lot of different things, but it really doesn't give you a good way of handling it. So I'm going to reiterate. All adventures are just a series of doors. Make sure your doors have a purpose. Don't throw a door up in front of a player that doesn't have meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. At that point, you're literally just wasting time. I will flat out say, I have thrown doors in front of players because I needed a second.
Yeah?
just I needed a second to handle a situation, and mentally. But the one thing I'm going to say about that is nothing is not a consequence of a failure. You can't say nothing happens. Mm-hmm. It is literally what happens when the GM isn't doing their job. If your players come across the door and attempt to unlock it and fail it, and you say nothing happens, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
You're literally not telling a story at that point. I
have literally, not figuratively, literally had this situation happen, and my player called me on it.
Yep.
You were at the table when it happened.
Yep.
They were like, so can I just pick it again? And I'm like, yeah.
We have our off moments.
Then why did you want me to roll? Because rolling to pick locks is what you do in D&D.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And at some point, you do that. Yeah. So one of the things that I did find was Gnome Stew does a really good job of what they call a menu of options.
Who's Gnome Stew?
okay, so Gnome Stew, I found this site randomly.
Okay.
While looking through some resources, and it was presented as a really good idea. Okay. And honestly, I love this.
This is gnomestew.com?
Yes, gnomestew.com has this, and I'll post up links. I think it was really good. And all this is that if you've got a failure, take a minute to look over this. It'll help you. You can remove resources. Just straight up remove resources. You failed it, okay? The knife you were using to jimmy it while you were holding your pins in the lock snaps. Your knife is no good anymore. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that was my good knife, or whatever. Or it can have a charge for the success. Meaning, like, maybe you're trying to get past the guards and you're persuading them, and they lead on to the fact that you're trying to get past them, and they're like, hey, a couple of gold might make me look the other way. And you're like,
yeah,
it's going to cost me money. And so you grease their palm and you move on. That's the cost of success.
Yep.
Sometimes there's other costs that are involved. The proverbial pound of flesh. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't get the demons right, but the demon says, but I want that.
Yep.
And then I'll do what you want. And you're like, do I want to give that up? And the answer is, do you have a choice? You do. There's a consequence. The other is, you can create the challenges or complications with a choice. And there are a plethora of things you can do for challenges and complications. We've talked about some of them earlier, that go along with that, where you get hurt. There might be a later complication of respect or reputation loss, things like that. People noticing you, people staring at you. You didn't get the thief, but the thief saw you, and he remembers your face. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, so he's going to tell somebody, that I'm not a member of the guard, but I was trying to chase this guy down. Okay, the Thieves Guild now knows that I am a bad person to talk to. I may not be able to work with them, right, because of this. Add conditions. Maybe they get tired. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe it took too long and they've got a headache. They're at disadvantage. They're, prone. They get knocked prone, which is another thing that I always like. When you're trying to pick a lock on a door and the door opens into your face, you get knocked prone. Uh-oh. Now you're caught flat-footed. Things like that. The drive toward doom, is another one that comes back to that. And that is the, hey, while we're in this dungeon, I remember you telling, we remember saying that there was a secret door down here. And it's like, so you guys are going to search for the secret door right now? You understand it's going to take you a while if you don't succeed. Yeah. Okay. Roll it. Okay. It took you, you failed the roll. It took you all night and into the next day before you found the door. Mm-hmm. It's been a day and a half. You're all tired. Oh my God, we didn't realize how long it was taking us. Uh-oh. What happened back at home? Because you took so long.
Yeah.
Another day forward. Did the hostage get moved? Did the stakes get higher? Things like that.
Right.
And sometimes failure is just failure. And that's because your players may not actually be doing, they're trying to do something that just gives them an advantage.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a thing where your players are like, hey, if I do this, does this mean because I did a perception check or an ambush check, I get this thing? Yeah, it didn't work out. Mm-hmm. Okay, there you go.
It is absolutely just okay. It is okay to just say, you fail.
You fail. Nothing happens to that, Yeah. And it's like, we're going to set an ambush for this guy. Great. You try and set up the ambush and it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Just too many people there. You can't get a good position. Okay. Yeah. So the ambush doesn't happen. You don't have to fail them forward on something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So just a short list of things you can do. And again, I'll post that up on our Discord so people can go there, because there's some really great stuff in there, and you can't always think of stuff off the top of your head. I'm bad at it when I'm not on Groove. It's kind of nice to have these little tool sets to be able to go, I need something.
Yeah, agreed.
So, all right. Questions.
So Hulavu asks, there are many reasons to hand out consequences, but often it's hard to, quote, hurt a character that your player at the table, and yourself have become attached to. How do you manage the emotional effects of handing out hard consequences?
Be a stone cold killer.
Yeah, it's
challenging.
It is challenging. It is challenging. I mean, I think handing out hard consequences it's difficult because the initial impulse, I think, is to just wallop them. You know, you reached for the stars and you got burned, you know?
Yeah.
You flew too high, too close to the sun.
Yeah.
But I think this is where kind of your like failing forward and your consequences with with opportunity kind of come in, you know, where you can definitely pad that by being like, yeah, okay, this happens. And even if it takes a scene or two to kind of hand out the silver lining, you know, show them in some way that just because there is a hard consequence levied on them, that doesn't mean that everything is boots up. That there is an open door there somewhere. There is an opportunity, even if it may not be an ideal situation, they can still move forward.
Yeah. And comfortable shoes make an easy road, but it doesn't make it interesting.
It's true.
And I'm sorry, if everything was perfect and Utopia was great, we wouldn't tell stories.
Beer, because no fun story ever started with a salad.
That's so true. Except obviously those marketing ads where the women are laughing. I don't get that.
We all laugh into our salads.
Oh,
yeah.
I wish I could. So yeah, just remember that sometimes when you give your character a scar, they'll go and show that off the next time around.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's the harder the consequences, the more you should show them that the story is going to continue, and that's I think how you pad
and
that
get
ball.
more interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Overwatch asks, when it comes to a player actions having consequences, how do you draw the line between consequence and punishment? Is that distinction an afterthought, or is it important to the well-being of your gaming table?
I think the line between consequence and punishment follows very closely with the line between in and out of character. In a lot of ways for me. Like, characters have consequences. Players get punishments. You know. I think
I can agree with that to a degree.
And I mean, I don't, to be clear, I don't think players should get punishments. Like, I don't think that's how your table should operate at all.
No.
You're creating a punitive sort of environment at your table. But I think a lot of storytellers fall into this trap where they try to handle, out of game problems in game. And they're like, well, this one character keeps, creating all sorts of distractions and murder hoboing people and is basically ruining my entire game. How do I punish the character? And you don't. You don't punish. That's the player being a jerk at your table.
And missing the theme.
And not playing well with others and just generally being an evil menace.
Yeah.
You address the player.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you avoid punishment. Consequence should feel like a logical following of actions, and it should also feel like it's a product of the story. Like, when done well, your consequences should just feel like another twist in the plot.
Yep. And there is something to be said for people who have characters that are where they're role-playing a character who has a certain personality, whether they are sassy, egomaniacal, things like that. If they're a challenging character that you've accepted and you feel is moving forward in the plot, but they still are doing things that are either counter to ethical things that are happening in game, maybe they're counter to some of the ethics of the players, as long as the players are okay with it, that's where it's a consequence for their actions. Their reputation is getting harmed. The reputation of the group gets harmed. So that you're swinging the story back into the setting, because it's very easy if you don't have a setting that presents itself to their players in a way that they can understand.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen a lot of people who talk about 7th Sea end up getting murder hobo teams in 7th Sea, and it's like, that's not the setting. It's very chivalrous.
Yeah.
You may tag somebody, but you're not going to murder anyone. You murder somebody in a duel, like that's horrific.
I'll be dead honest with you. To this day, on that subject, to this day, I am still, like, Sarah is confused why shooting a pirate captain that is trying to board them and murder every single one of them, why shooting him in the head was wrong.
There's a time and a place for everything.
I don't get it.
Nope.
Should I have let them board us and start killing people?
It's a matter of that's a longer discussion.
All right. We'll talk about it.
And again, but that's also about the presentation.
But yeah. But there was consequences.
There was consequences.
And okay, I didn't understand it. Sarah didn't understand it. Madeline certainly didn't.
Correct.
But okay, and I realized that it was a thing. It was a choice I made. It was a misstep, and I dealt with the consequences of it.
And it changed your character wholly.
It changed a lot of my character. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, but that's my thing about consequences and punishment. I agree with the whole fact that punishment is really not something that happens, but consequence should happen for actions. But I think if you're dealing with punishments, it's a punishment is better handled outside of the table of like, are you guys all like okay with this? No, we're not. All right, well then maybe we should move on. Like maybe this character needs to move on and we need to do something else, So yeah, I think that's my distinction is that if it's changing the narrative of the story and the other players in the group do not agree with it, then it needs to be discussed as players.
Yeah, I agree. So Nevim asks us, how do you find the right consequences to apply? For me, the first question is what would logically happen?
Yeah.
Second is, immediately following that is, what's fun and dramatic to have happen?
Yeah.
And conversely, what isn't fun?
Right.
It's one thing to levy out consequences, and just be like, oh yeah, rocks fall, you all die. Because that's, kind of getting back to your, climbing out of the pit thing. The first thing you'd mentioned there was that the storyteller in question was asking, like, if they fail, do they just fall and die?
Right.
And I'm like, no. Hard no.
Yeah.
Like, that's not fun. It's not rocks fall, all die. It's PCs fall, they all die, And nobody wants their characters, especially their whole campaign, to end like that. That's just anticlimactic and super fun, and nobody would have fun with that.
Right. Is
it the most realistic consequence? Probably.
Yeah.
But it's the least fun.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
Yeah. So make an exchange.
So it's finding that correct intersection of what is realistic, what fits the narrative, what's a logical conclusion to this point of failure, or point of success, as we're talking about consequences, but doing that all with a mind of what is going to be engaging for the players and create an interesting narrative in its outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, should a consequence be easily linked to its parent action?
Absolutely.
I think so. Even if it comes later, you should be able to a player should be able to connect the dots.
Yes. And you'll be surprised, especially if you're playing the long game with people, you'd be surprised how dense some of your characters can be. when you're writing it, it seems obvious.
Yes, because you see everything.
Because you see everything and you're mired in your plot 24/7. But your players, you're going to have significant gaps there. They may not realize that the reason that the big bad evil guy has the magical scepter is because 17 game sessions ago an NPC tried to offer it to you, but you didn't realize what it was, so they gave it to the villain instead.
Yeah.
But spelling it out or showing that to them in some way is always an option. You have full narrative control. You should use it.
Yeah.
To help them link these things so that it doesn't seem like it's coming out of left field.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I agree.
Things coming out of left field feel like a loss of agency, and that's bad for your players.
Exactly. So,
all right.
I think we've gone a little long. But we've got a topic. We are going back to Storyteller 101 next week with the player's role. We're going to be talking about like pre-gen characters, restrictions, handling things during session 0, and the fact that you can say no when you're actually sitting at the table and putting stuff together. Because it is your story.
Yep.
no matter how jointly it's being told with everyone else.
So Storyteller 101, the player's role. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us on our Discord. Shoot us some questions. We'd love to answer them here on the air. You can find the link to our Discord on our Twitter, as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon name members, Knox the Box Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, and Hula View. We truly appreciate all your support every single month. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/Arcane Anthems. Our intro music, which you heard at the beginning, was Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who have sat with us at our tables over the years to give us these great stories and experiences to share with you. And you, every single one of our listeners. We love you so much.
We love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.